All right. Is Alex ready? Yep.
One sec, let me just make sure I got the email about
Can I have an extra
YouTube.
pen? I feel like this thing's gonna die. We'll just
Alex,
leave it there, thank
are we
you.
on YouTube? Yeah. All right, not yet. It takes a little bit of time. Let's see. Now we're good. It's on the YouTube now.
It's good?
We're up, Alex. Yep, good to go.
Recording in progress.
Greg, are you good?
Yep, we're good.
All right. So welcome to the public portion of the Chatham Township Committee Workshop Meeting on March 7th, 2023. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First off this evening, I'd like to take a moment to recognize two former Chatham Township employees who passed away recently. The first was former Land Use Administrator David Wheelock. David Wheelock passed away on February 16th. He graduated from Chatham Township High School in 1967 and enlisted in the U.S. Navy. He was a Vietnam veteran and then joined our staff for 30 years. He was a volunteer firefighter with Chatham Township's Volunteer Fire Department, and he will be greatly missed. The second was Joseph R. Smith, who passed away on March 3rd. Joseph Smith was our former Director of Public Works, who worked for the township for 32 years. He was also a Vietnam veteran who served on the U.S. Maori. May he rest in peace. Can we take a moment of silence for both of those? Thank you. On a different note, I'd like to welcome a couple of the Boy Scouts from Troop 8 who are working on their community merit badges. We are happy to have you join us this evening. So this is our 5th workshop meeting, and I wanted to give the public some background on these meetings and let everyone know how we will be conducting ourselves and our meetings. Historically in Chatham Township, the mayor sets the agenda and has the responsibility to make sure there is a consensus that everything will be passed. The problem with this was that if you were in the minority and wanted a specific topic to be heard, it most likely wouldn't be brought up or would never make it onto an agenda. I wanted the creation of these agendas to be more collaborative and to include all committee members as well as the department heads who we rely on every day to operate the municipality. That is how we came up with the format we've been using. Essentially, if any committee member or department head wants an item to be on the agenda or discussed with the entire committee, all they need to do is email me and our administrator at least a week ahead of time. Essentially, my response is pretty much always that we will add it to our next workshop meeting to discuss. We all have different opinions, but I believe giving everybody the opportunity to address a topic they are interested in and making a case for it to the rest of the committee is valuable. In my role as chair of these meetings, I try my hardest to keep the meetings moving along, as these meetings do tend to have a lot more topics and ideas on them because of the collaborative nature. For the most part, when I see that everyone has made their point and addressed any counterpoints, I try to figure out where the consensus lies. A consensus of our committee is 3 votes. And while I'm not looking for a commitment on how a committee member will vote on a resolution, I'm simply trying to give guidance and direction to our professionals and staff on how to move forward. It is rare for all 5 of us to agree on something. Nonetheless, I don't want to stifle any ideas. If a point is made repeatedly by the same person and no one else has anything to add, I will move on to the next topic. I do ask that questions regarding items on the agenda to be sent to our administrator by noon on Monday before the workshop meetings to give our administrator, township employees, and professionals time to gather the information needed to answer those questions. The goal is to make sure our employees and professionals always feel comfortable at these workshop meetings to help us in our decision making. Their presence here at these meetings are helpful to the public and to all of us as we work together and make decisions. I want to make it clear we are never here to try and put an employee or professional in the hot seat at a public meeting, trying to just surprise them with unexpected questions. If that appears to be occurring, I'll put an end to it. So now we're going to move on to the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Or is it roll call? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we are going to go to our first hearing of citizens. Currently, the committee meeting room is open to the public, and we look forward to having you join us. Additionally, this meeting is being made available for public participation remotely. If you're watching via Zoom, you may speak during the public comment session by following the Zoom instructions to raise your hand. Whether in person or online, when you are recognized to speak, please say your name, spell your last name, and give your street number. As a reminder, all public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Rather than using any of your time answering questions, we will wait until you finish speaking before responding. Each member of the public will be limited to 1 comment during the public comment period. Written comments submitted to the Township Clerk before 3 p.m. will be read during the public comment sessions. Written comments are subject to the same guidelines as oral comments. Duplicative written comments may be summarized rather than read in full according to the guidelines issued by the New Jersey Division of Local Government Services.
No written comments.
Perfect. Is there anybody here that wants to speak? Anybody? Is there anybody on Zoom?
We do not have any hands raised.
No, alright, and last call. Alright, well then I will close the hearing of citizens and move straight on to reports. Which report do we want to start with? What do you think? Okay, let's do the library first.
Is that microphone on?
Thank you, Mayor Felice, Deputy Mayor Hamilton, committee members Ewald, Lois, Choi, and Administrator Shahadi. My name is Andy Hollander. Last year was a year of welcome. It was a year of welcome back, first of all. Director Karen Brodsky ably led the library in delivering services on a daily basis since the very first days of the pandemic. And as it receded last year, community demand for the library returned to pre-pandemic levels, above those of 2019, and exceeded them. Details later. Also, welcome to all of our community. As the banner at left shows, last April our neighbors came to the library and wrote welcome in an added language that they speak. It's 25 languages there. You can see Vice President of the board, Kevin Sullivan, at right, and former mayor of the township. A special thank you, committee member Lois, for speaking at that event. And we welcomed action. The Board of Trustees in November authorized construction of the first phase of the bridging project, a teen room and an improved access ramp at back. You see here an art exhibition and a group of young people. In all, 1,200 programs and meetings drew 21,000 participants. Community demand for the library and its services is sky high. Let's compare numbers from 2019, the year before the pandemic started, to last year. Numbers are up. They're up from before the pandemic, they're up regarding circulation. Visits are up significantly. Reference desk questions are up. The library is a bridge. It brings together all age groups, children, teens, adults, senior citizens. It bridges the township and the borough, newcomers, and those born here. All backgrounds and political persuasions. And it brings the world to Chatham and vice versa. To sustain quality service, the library needs to modernize its spaces to meet changing needs and upgrade infrastructure. This is the bridging project. We're planning for a renovated children's room with a new activity center, if you could go to the, we're planning for a renovated children's room with a new activity center, a teen room, more conference rooms, a local history room, a better back ramp, a business center, upgraded infrastructure like HVAC, that is heating, ventilation, air conditioning. HVAC may not sound glamorous, but it's essential. The HVAC system at the library is a patchwork because of how earlier additions were made to the library, 7 additions to the library. So let's say you enter the building, you're in the 1924 wing, the original footprint. You're with your kids, you want to go to a children's program in the children's area. So you make a right and you pass through the 1964 edition that has our oversized books and audiovisual materials. You get to the children's wing, which is one of the 3 2004 editions. Your kids have an entertaining children's program, and you say, maybe I'll pick up a couple of books before I go home. A travel book, a biography. So you walk back with the front desk at your left, you go to the reference desk, which is in the 1960 edition. You go to the biographies, and that's going to be, again, in the other side of the 2004 edition. Remember, there's the children's room here, 2004, one's to your right, and then to your left is biographies. Then you want to get your travel books, so you go to the adult stacks, and that's in the 1983 edition to the rear. Your kids, you're worried that they're going to get a little fussy, you want to get them home, so you go to the check out your books. The librarian is standing in the 1940 edition of the library. And let's not forget the 1991 wing at the rear of the library where books are processed. So that's 7 editions. You can only imagine the HVAC challenges in integrating 7 different, essentially, HVAC systems. And that is one explanation why the library has a problem with excessive humidity and why electrical systems lack cohesiveness. Through fundraising and prudent management, the library has $2 million for the project. But the architect's recent estimate is that the total will be $7.5 million. That's a shortfall of $5.5 million for later phases. Even as community demand for the library continues to go up, unfortunately, so do projected costs. About 13% per year. Funding the bridging project now will save millions compared to delaying it. The library has done fundraising since 2016. We're going to continue to do it. We will. The library has $2 million in funds, and in November, it said to Chatham Township and Chatham Borough that an added $5.5 million is necessary. If we needed proof how important our library is, community demand is bouncing back just as strong and even stronger as the pandemic recedes. The library continues to be a bridge that welcomes all and welcomes all back and welcomes modernizing and upgrading. Thank you, and now Karen Brodsky and I will welcome questions.
First of all, I want to thank you both for coming and presenting this. This was a wonderful presentation, and it's so nice for you guys to come in once a year and we get a nice update on how well the library's doing, and I know it's such a valuable resource for our community, so I really appreciate that.
Our pleasure, thank you.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the report?
Yeah, I have a question, and I also thank you. I love the library, and I think you guys are doing an awesome job, so I appreciate everything you do. There's been some discussion about phasing in, and I understand there's, I think, the teen center and business center maybe. Can you talk a little bit about phasing in, and if you explore that a little bit more, how you might be able to phase in the work that needs to get done?
That's exactly right, committee member Ewald. We have planned the library in phases. Phase 1, which actually is authorized, and you're going to see construction over the next several months begin, we hope, is for a teen room at Left, if you know where the biographies are, past the reference desk. That's going to become a teen room. There's just real demand for having the teens have their own space. And also, in phase 1, there's going to be a back ramp and an entry plaza in the rear of the building. Back ramp to help, for example, seniors have better access into the library, and those with strollers, such as like double strollers, make it easier. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 and successive phases are going to depend on being able to secure a commitment of funds, because there's somewhat of a, one thing will depend on another, which depends on another. If we don't know the number that we are going to be shooting for, it will be difficult for the architect to create different phasing plans. But in terms of what those phasing plans are going to have, and I apologize, there was a slide there that didn't seem to show up, but I'll repeat it, and in fact, there it is. A renovated children's room with a new activity center, teen space, more conference rooms, a local history room, back ramp, a business center you mentioned, and upgraded infrastructure. When you talk about business center, one reason is, as we've seen through the pandemic, more and more folks are working at home. We want the library to be a supplement to that. And we've had, in fact, a great amount of demand of people coming into the library and looking for Wi-Fi and printing, and so we want to have a business center to help accommodate that.
I guess I'll ask a question a different way. Do you have a breakdown of the cost? So do you know how much, for example, the HVAC is going to cost to install versus the, there's no expansions. I guess the rest is just reconfiguring the facilities.
If I may, committee woman, to an extent, Karen and I and my counterpart in the borough, Steve Williams, have been meeting on an almost monthly basis and kind of going over those same questions. Karen can tell you I've been asking and trying to pick those numbers apart a little bit, so that way we can then come to you with capital requests and figure out exactly, you know, what the budget can, what the budget has capacity for. So Karen has been quite helpful in trying to put those numbers together for us, and I think we can fine tune them. I don't, trying to remember where we've left off. I know you've sent me quite a bit of documents.
Thank you. You're being generous. The logical question would be, well, which is the second phase and what is it gonna cost? The problem that we have is this humidity issue that started in 2017. And we have gone over the humidity study that was done. The reason for the humidity is much of the HVAC equipment is oversized for the spaces it's servicing. So this equipment costs $100,000 per unit. We don't want to throw it away. Some of it is new as of 2017. So what the architect proposed was repurposing them to fit new spaces. So for example, right now, perhaps the unit that's servicing the front part of the children's room would also service the media area. So depending on the funding that's available, so phase one is approximately $1 million. We're just doing the construction estimate now because the board didn't want to pay for it until we were sure that we would be able to fund it. The reason for doing the back ramp is because we secured an $80,000 Morris County Community Development Block Grant. I said that wrong, but that we're going to lose if we don't do it. It's been a while. And the teen room is just an essential that everybody's screaming for. Teens are screaming. Other people are saying, stop the teens from screaming. We want the teens in the library, and we're doing great things with the teens, but other people also need to use libraries, so it has to be an enclosed space, which we don't have dedicated enclosed space. I hope that's helpful.
That's okay, I can wait until I don't wanna put you guys on the spot, I can wait until the process is, you work through with, the administrators, to get more detail. Thank you.
Is phase one gonna be, and I may know the answer to this question, I'm asking for the public, going to be funded entirely from the money that the library has on hand?
The library has more than $2 million, and so phase one, as Director Brodsky said, will be 1 million or just south of it. It may be a question of how are the funds going to be earmarked? Will that be coming from the library's bucket? Will it be coming from public funding? And I would note that, and I've said this, and the library is grateful for all the support that it has from the township and the borough. The library is not a self-funding mechanism, so it's a cherished community institution that serves all, and public funding is really what libraries or free public libraries are all about. But to answer your question directly, the library could cover that first almost $1 million.
Well, to echo what everybody else says, obviously, we are all very appreciative, and the whole community, and the community, I think, is proud to support the library, and obviously, you guys know me, I'm happy to serve as the mayor's, appointed representative on the board with you guys, and I look forward to continuing to work with you and hearing from Mr. Shadi what you bring in. But I see some of the friends out there, so since this is one of our normal meetings, but to the extent people are watching at home, I always like to plug the Friends of the Library book sale, which starts on Saturday. So if you're around the borough on Saturday, definitely check it out. It's a great event.
Yeah, a former mayor would have said that the library is the crown jewel of our towns, and I would echo that. I have a question for you about your teen space. Maybe this is an older term, but teen center comes to mind. I don't believe we have any other teen center in the Chathams. Would you consider the teen space to be a bit of a teen center? Is that an idea? Because it is my understanding that we have on our books some funding that is available for a teen center. And that's the root of my question.
I can ask Director Brodsky to chime in, but I know that tentatively the plan is to have a teen space where all of the work that we're going to be doing is going to be flexible. So for example, for the teen space, for weekdays up until a certain time period, say until after school, adults can be there. And then the teens will come, and that's their space. So answer your question, yes, it is for teens. And I think the teens are going to want to say, you know, thank you, and the adults are going to be migrating away towards a different part of the library.
I think you said it all.
Thank you both so much for coming. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate all your work on the library. It's really a crown jewel, as was said, of the town. I just have one last question. So I know it was mentioned previously, I think this was brought up today, that I know you guys had previously, with the, can you go back to your grant, the slide that you had on your grants that you're requesting?
Oh, I don't think we actually have a slide.
I thought there was one on there that was discussing what you submitted for grants, or that you were looking to submit.
It was, yeah. There, that
Nope,
one.
the other one, go.
There's a brief mention.
Yep,
You-
nope, one more.
One more?
Yeah.
Nope. I'm sorry. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I
The
just.
one with the picture of the
Yes.
library?
Lots of writing on it.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
one with a lot of writing on it.
Oh, the bridging slide. Okay, that's, yeah.
Yeah, that one. Okay.
I will jump in and ask the grant question. You applied
Right.
last year, and I thought we missed it by one. Do we not think we would be priority if you went back again this year?
You can't go back. There were only 2 rounds.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there, and
Obviously.
we were, as most libraries that applied, we did not get the funding, but we were the first runner-up for round 2.
Oh, okay.
And nobody knows what that means, or if it means anything, or if it ever will mean anything.
Okay.
So are we gonna wait again and let it go up another 5.5 million? It doesn't seem like that's something we should do.
Yeah.
Okay, and you don't know if you're allowed to apply again? And then
That one was a limited.
We
thing.
know.
that was a limited thing, okay.
This is
Got it.
Specific thing, yeah.
Got it, okay. Okay, that was kind of my question.
Yeah, and we did what the towns asked for, which is to seek any and all sources of funding.
Yeah, well, I know it was previously mentioned that you guys have explored, the community projects grant, at the federal level. I think that was last year as well. Are you guys gonna are considering applying for that again?
We absolutely are, but 1 of 15 will be champion.
Right.
And,
Well, I mean, perhaps we can submit, a resolution in support of that, if
Thank
that would, you know, in any way we can help.
letters of support are part of the application process,
Right.
and I did send.
No, I'm gonna be doing that specifically, but maybe a whole resolution.
Right, I mean,
or
we could
two.
do a formal resolution on it as well.
We'll do a
I
resolution
don't
at the
see
next
that it
meeting.
can hurt. Is it going
Uh-huh.
to get us the funding?
Is everybody okay here with, submitting, you know, putting it on the next agenda, a resolution? We
Yeah.
just need 3.
It's after the application's due, but they could supplement
They
the
can
application.
supplement it, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we got at least 3, so you're good. All right. Well, thank you very much, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor Felice and all, and as Deputy Mayor Hamilton said, the Friends of the Library will be having their book sale. Come this weekend at the library. It's one of the best vibes you're gonna experience here in our town. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, on to the next item.
Finance.
Yeah, let's, Deb, yep, you ready? Okay.
So, CFO submitted her report. Just as a reminder, we are operating on a temporary budget. For the public, and for anybody who doesn't know, a temporary budget's a term of art in municipal finance, meaning that until you adopt your complete budget for the year, you operate on a temporary budget. And that is, your initial budget is based off of a formula, 26.25%. And then anything after that is an emergency appropriation. which is essentially extending your temporary budget until such a time that you've adopted your budget. So it's not uncommon that you, quote, run out of money in the temporary budget in certain departments, and that's why you need an extension. So Debbie's presented the status of where we are in terms of our budget on the temporary budget, and obviously a need for a temporary budget extension. She's put together a draft of what that looks like. We may have, some minor modifications after additional review with some of our department heads, mostly our bigger ones, the DPW and the police department, because they tend to have some of the larger expenses up front. But otherwise, there's nothing out of the ordinary in this budget extension, but Debbie's here to answer any questions you might have either on the report or the emergency appropriation to the temporary budget for the next meeting.
There was some discussion as to whether or not the budget would be introduced on the
21st.
21st. Are you gonna proceed with that or no?
Probably not.
Okay.
We do have, in the local finance notice, it gives us the provision to introduce the next following meeting after March 31st. So that way we are not rushed, and that way we can do a thorough presentation to the public. We just discussed it recently, so we haven't talked about it with you
Okay.
two on the finance committee, but my recommendation will be that we wait until the April meeting to adopt. And so, I'm sorry, to introduce, I apologize.
Yes.
The April meeting to introduce, and this temporary budget extension should get us through the end of May. We may come back with yet another one, but the goal is that this gets us through May, which is by that point, the budget will be adopted and then essentially override these temporary budgets.
Okay.
That looks good to me.
You know,
And
the
it's-
question-
You'll have a capital plan by 3/31?
No, not by 3/31. Capital plan probably after we've introduced the operating budget. It's gonna go sort of hand in hand, but within or shortly thereafter of the introduction, we'll have a capital plan to introduce. Gotta meet with the finance committee and show them and finalize it with them as well.
So, would the other members of the committee have an opportunity to advocate for something to be included in the capital plan before
Yes.
that plan?
Yep, absolutely.
What we put in the budget is actually preliminary, and it's just a plan. All changes are done after that, if you have to make any modifications, or we would actually, implement the capital budget. So we would do an amendment to the budget, if need be.
Oh, okay,
So
understood.
that's a normal routine process.
And that's all right around the May timeframe?
The capital budget is
Years
part
done.
of the normal budget process. There's a section that's capital, it's part of the operating, it goes with that, but it's just a plan.
Yeah, so to clarify, right, in the operating budget, there is in the user-friendly budget and there a capital plan, but that is a very loose document. When I also talk about capital, and Debbie and I do this all the time, she always scratches her head when I say this. Your capital tends to also refer to if you're doing any ordinances, right? So your capital plan and your budget is one thing, but then you do capital ordinances to actually effectuate that plan. So generally when a lot of towns put their capital plan in their operating budget, it's just a very, very loose framework, just to kind of check the box that they did it. And then they follow it up with more specific, either by way of ordinances. So we're gonna be trying to do both, which is, really have a good solid plan, but that's really just a very loose framework. We're trying to develop a 1, 3, and 5 year capital plan from everything from our police vehicles to infrastructure to the water plant, so on and so forth. So that's gonna take a little bit more time.
The ordinance is what will actually implement the
Right,
capital
okay.
budget. It's not this part of it, this is just a plan per se, which can be modified and amended once you do an ordinance.
And is that sufficiently substantive that it would be worthy of review, or?
The capital
is it
plan and the
just
operating budget?
Sheer bone, no meat, not worth looking at?
The capital plan and the operating budget?
The preliminary capital plan.
Some towns take the approach that they really want to invest a lot of time and effort into it. It really, it's going to be, we're going to try to make it as thorough as possible, but it's not going to be the comprehensive, the real capital plan, which is what I'm trying to strive for is more of a strategic plan.
And is that customarily shared amongst the committee or just finance committee?
No, it'll be shared with the full committee. Yep. Yes.
Any other questions for Deb? All right, I think you're good. Thank you very much. All right,
Engineering?
yeah, John, you're up.
He's gonna be here a while. Settle in, John.
Greg told me to be everything quick. So. Must be.
So you all received John's report, and then there are a number of items here, 2 through 6, which are sort of requests from the committee and outside sources. So we'll touch on the report. You have one highlight, I think we went over.
Yeah, one thing, I have some great news. It only took 8 years, but we finally got DOT to approve going out to bid for the Lafayette Spring Street Sidewalk project. So, and it's funny, it's they give authorization to bid, yet there's a caveat, we have to send them the final documents to prove. And so but they want to see the final documents because the bidding documents, you have to update all the prevailing wages, the Brooks Acts, and the things, and give them the final notice to award. So, I think that we're going to aggressively get their final approval so that we can go out to bid. And so I think Z and I discussed to have the committee authorize going out to bid on the 25th.
Okay.
By that time, I should have the DOT's final approval to actually advertise. The process is we have to go out to bid and we have to advertise for 3 weeks and advertise in the paper all 3 of those weeks, and that's a minimum period. So we'll probably go for like a month to receive the root bids. And so ultimately, we're looking at having, I want to try and get the contract set up so that the contractor starts, July 1st. So this way he has the summer, 2 months, solid 2 months to get it work while the school's out. So we're thinking that maybe the second meeting in May, maybe the target date to have the actual award. So, it did take 8 years, and as part of this recent process of getting their authorization, we did ask for additional funding to cover the cost of the project because, the estimate that was, a $400,000 project turned into a $900,000 project over 8 years. So, they did authorize that additional fund. So the grant is set up to cover 100% of the costs. And I have been through this program many times, so that I think that bid is a very, the current estimate is very conservative. I would expect it actually to come below that. I'm going to be surprised if it goes over $900,000 for that project. Yeah. But nevertheless, if it does go over, I've had a lot of success just going back to the DOT and asking for a little bit more, and they've accommodated that. We also have a grant to cover the construction period services, and because it's a federal grant, they require someone on site all the time. And even if you have one laborer, raking topsoil, you're supposed to have someone watching them rake the topsoil to make sure they're doing it. There's a lot of paperwork involved, so it's great that we got that grant also, and so it's moving along. So hopefully the rest of them start to come a little faster. And is there anything for the next meeting? The next meeting will be authorization to go out to bid.
Yeah. Okay.
Wonderful.
So we know to expect
Good
that.
news.
This is a TAP grant, just to clarify.
This is a safe route.
Safe route,
route.
which is, but it's a pass-through, it's a federal pass-through.
Correct.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the reason I bring that up is, next time you see some of these grants, they sound nice, but the federal ones are very burdensome, have been through them before. They take a long time, they are, just in terms of the process and the steps involved to just get the money and actually carry it out, they make it sound very enticing, but it's quite a pain.
It's quite a pain, but I've been through it many times, and this is where you get the most significant grant funds. You're not going to, under a municipal aid program, you're not going to get $900,000. It's just, so this is where if you want more significant grants, this is the way to go. You just got to buckle down and just get through it.
But it's more of that kind of planning, right?
Yeah.
Those aren't grants that you want to apply for when you're thinking like, oh, this project we want to do next year. There's a lot of demand from the community. Yeah. We'll get this and hopefully get it done next year. No, this is something that you want to think about like 5 to 10 years down the road. What are projects that we might need, and start getting those developed and
the same process that you go through for the sidewalk project is the same process that you'll go through if you're doing a bridge that's $1 billion. It's just the same rigorous process that they go through, and so it's just they should really come to scale it back, but they are following the federal requirements. So it's just.
Do we have any others that are like in the earlier stage, like say it's an 8-year process. Do we have any that are in year 1 or year 2 at this point?
Yeah, we have 2 other grants that we got from the Safe Route, and they're both on Shunpike, and we're going on either side of Shunpike. And those, this took extremely long, really because this was a 2014 grant that we submitted, and we got it in 15. And this was the first period where they started to do the design assistance programs, and they just did not have their ducks in a row regarding how to implement that program, and it just dragged out a long time. We probably lost 2 or 3 years just them getting this program that they put in place to expedite the projects actually took longer, some of these, I believe we did the right course of action to get the design assistance, to have them pay for it and go through it. But some of them, towns that I work in that just did not want to wait this long for this design, because you can expedite it if you design it yourself. I've within 2 years you can actually crank this through and get it through. But it's you're paying for the design then. So.
But we have 2. So to John's question, we have 2 other grants like this, right?
Correct. And
there's
those
the 2016
are,
and
those
2018.
are not going to. I don't anticipate those are 2016 and 18. Those I would expect that we may be bidding them next year. I would think.
That was going to be my next question.
Great.
Yeah, I would think that the DOT is moving. I think they're also getting a black eye, looking at why isn't these projects getting done, and so it doesn't look good for them either that it's not getting done. So I think they seem to be a little bit more aggressive with the consultants that they've hired that we choose from. They seem to be really on their back a little bit more to make sure that they're moving along and pushing it through.
That's great.
So.
Any questions on the report or any other report items?
All
Should we
right.
get into the?
Go on to the
That's-
next.
That's separate from the other stuff. That's
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the first one, Committeewoman Ewald, you had asked that we have a discussion on the tree ordinance. So that's on here along with the sort of background, the chain of correspondence that spurred this, which was, I believe it was on Susan Drive, or I forget which one, but
Sunset.
Sunset. Sorry.
So, just by way of background, what happened more recently was I had gotten complaints from residents on Sunset Drive because a house that's under development, the lot was clear cut, so, or at least that's how people refer to it. And there were 2 large oaks, for example, 2 large healthy oaks in the front that were taken down. And this is, this is not the first time. This question comes up all the time. Every time. Well, and then with Dixie Dale, when of course that was clear cut. So people have a lot of concerns. Originally, the plan was to address the tree ordinance as part of the master plan process. Usually there's some zoning changes that come out of that, and that was the original intent. But since that didn't take place, and being prompted again by this other request, I thought I'd bring it to the committee to learn about the tree ordinance, what is required, and then to think about whether or not we want to make changes. The flip side is, you'll often hear from residents when they just want to take down one tree that's diseased, they feel like they have to jump through hoops, where developers just come in. I mean, this is what they say, that developers come in and just clear cut and don't have the same, there's not the same ramifications for a developer as a resident. At least that's how they're feeling when they have to go through the process. I did get the application, and it is, in my opinion, a bit onerous. It's, I'm still trying to figure out how density is calculated, but, why don't we take a step back, and if you can kind of tell us about what the requirements are.
Yeah, well, I'll just step back and just kind of reflect that, the current ordinance is probably the 4th ordinance that I've seen come through since I've been in Chatham Township. This is something that does come up every 4 to 5 years. We question the tree ordinance, and it really is a struggle between maintaining, trying to protect the trees, but also maintaining people's property rights to how they want to develop their property.
Right.
Are we going to stop someone from saving a tree versus putting a patio in, versus putting a pool in, versus just clearing their yard so they can play ball or play sports in their backyard? And so that's always been the struggle that we've had, is that what are we going to what is going to be the criteria at which we deny a tree permit? What are we going to be? What do we want to be able to do? Deny? And right now, the ordinance, and it's always been set this way, that it was never an ordinance to deny a permit. It was more of an ordinance to regulate the management of trees. And so right now, we're looking at regulating density. And so if as long as you have a certain density on the trees, you don't have to do a replacement. Now, if you fall below that density, you have to do a replacement tree. And then we also, when we're looking at density, we actually looking at density on, not over the entire lot, but we want density where the trees would be most likely be protected. We say within 5 feet of the property line, within 20 feet of the rear line, and then I think we say within 20 feet of the front yard. So we're looking at trees, trying to maintain those trees along the perimeter of the property, because we know interior trees are likely going to come down for some type of improvement or other means or something. So we try to regulate density not only as like a number of 16 trees per acre, but also try to regulate that density around the perimeter. And so, the tree ordinance does not prohibit. We've had developers, if they come in and they want to clear cut the entire lot and just replace every single tree that they have to meet the density. We've had that. Joe DiMarzo was notorious for that. Luckily he's not doing as many homes lately. I don't get as many calls, but the tree ordinance is more to manage the trees versus to prohibit a removal of the tree. The only condition that sets it up for a possible denial is that if a person has a tree within 20 feet of the front yard, basically a street tree, and that street tree is something that's is character for that neighborhood, that you have continuous oaks, so you have certain street trees, a uniform. We actually, in order to sign off on that tree being removed, you actually have to have 2 zoning officers sign off on it, so we can have a different perspective, so that if we do deny it, we really have 2 people looking at it, and we have our sign. So that's really more regulated towards looking at the street trees versus any other component. So yes, the application is very complicated because the ordinance was really complicated because we were trying to get the best ordinance that we can get together to manage trees, yet try to save as many trees as we can, yet not have a burden to the residents that we're going to deny someone. Because certainly, and so there's other reasons why people remove trees. Some people are just concerned, it's leaning over the house. I don't want that leaning on the house. I don't want that falling on the house during a storm, and they want to remove it. There is, I see a pattern happening, is that we do have a stipulation that if a tree is dead, we did not require a replacement. So that was something that was discussed. We don't want to burden a homeowner that's just taking down a dead tree, have to pay the cost to replace it. Diseased, and we have distressed and those type of trees. So more and more, it seems like every tree is in distress. Every tree is dead. Every tree is getting, because we require a tree expert to sign off on it, and most of these companies have them on staff, and I'm always getting letters saying that. So it just seems like a loophole has kind of been created regarding not having as many replacement trees. There is a lot of we could certainly do more on the administrative end, yet it's really not a self-funding permit process.
Right.
We had a big debate on the planning board over are we going to charge $25, $50, $100, and I think we ended up saying I think it's just $50 to do that, and then for $50 it really requires a check to make sure people having the trees are actually correct, and then even a follow-up. Are those replacement trees actually being planted, and we are not doing as much enforcement as we could, because we really don't have the staff to do it.
Do you have a tree bank?
We do not have a tree bank. We don't, and that's something we can talk about regarding that. And I think the general discussion is, like I started off the conversation, is what is going to be the circumstances that we deny a permit. Someone wants to do something. Are we really going to regulate, deny something that someone has a concern over, or someone wants to do improvements, and so it's a really difficult ordinance to find that balance. And in fact, I'm working right now, Denville, I'm the town engineer there, and we're doing a tree ordinance there too. We're revamping it.
Are you using the Chatham one as an example?
No, but we're just scratching the surface, but we're going to have these same conversations regarding, and when their ordinance is set up so that they're focusing more on the larger developments, and they actually exempt properties that are less than a half acre, so that, most of our lots would be taken out as being exempt, so it wouldn't even really apply. One of the things, one thing is it realistic to have an ordinance that balances, that actually, preserves a tree versus, is it more practical to have an ordinance that actually focuses more on replacement? Should we be more aggressive on, you remove a tree, you replace a tree, so that we're replacing trees as we go, and give homeowners the option of, is it a 1-to-1 replacement, or is it a 2-to-1, or a 3-to-1? So if someone's taking down a 36-inch tree, is that justifies a 1-to-1 replacement, or should that be a 2 or a 3 replacement? And if they can't, if they don't want to replant it, or if they can't replant it because they have the density, then they put it into a tree bank. And then possibly the tree bank then is administered like through the Environmental Commission or other things, and find, locations. I live in Long Valley, and the environmental, they have a tree bank, and the Environmental Commission, they went down my block and they just started to plant trees along, the ones that were taken down, and just, doing that. So, we can look at it more of a focus more on a replacement versus, trying to protect those trees, which is difficult. It's difficult to find that balance, regarding balancing people's property rights.
Any of these ordinances ever, it's hard to imagine anybody necessarily going all the way to the mat for this, but been like substantively challenged, like in court, as far as the enforceability or even constitutionality of them?
Property rights, basically.
No.
I'm just envisioning somebody who gets a new job and moves here from Palm Springs, and I like living in the desert, and I paid a couple $1 million for this lot, and I don't want to see any trees. Can you really tell
We're not
somebody
the right town to move.
what to do?
I would have to say, I've not seen an ordinance yet that really restricts, that denying a permit. It usually is more towards, encouraging to save as many trees, but not necessarily, denying someone from cutting a tree down. I haven't seen really an ordinance that's strict.
Yeah.
To have it challenged that way.
When I looked at other towns, it was what they were talking about, that you would have, first of all, some of it's the definition. So ours kicks in when a tree is a diameter of 12 inches.
12 inches, yeah.
Some are bigger, a lot are smaller. But a lot of them do have, in some cases, it's a progressive scale. So if you have a larger tree, you have to give more trees back. So you take out a 36-inch, you have to put in 5 trees, let's say. But if you can't put them on your property, and it doesn't get into density calculations, which is where the application gets a little complicated for most, I would say. But instead, if you just know you got to put back, you take out 4, you got to put back 6, or you got to put back 3, whatever that number is, then you can choose where you put it on your property, or you can choose to pay into a bank, and then the town puts it somewhere. But
Or
you're
you
maintaining.
allocate the Environmental Commission to handle it, or something like that.
Yeah.
That sounds like.
Spread the trees around rather than putting them together.
Yeah, but you can certainly look at a planting plan and have that worked out. One of the earlier ordinance, we actually had, we had a town arborist, and that town arborist would go and review the trees, go out to every single property. Because it was two things. One, Tom Chickarone didn't want to keep paying the arborist because it wasn't being funded, and then secondly,
I don't want to pay the arborist.
I didn't want to pay the arborist to keep going out because it was getting excessive. And then also, it was funny, it wasn't funny at all, but the arborist would go out there and he would, inspect the tree, but then he would say, oh, that tree looks like it's that, you should really take that tree and that tree down too, because really looking at how to make all the trees more healthy because they were over too many of them, and he ended up removing more trees. But, one of our first ordinance that we had, which I thought was a bit aggressive, where when they had something like a 36-inch tree, you had to redo 6 or 7 replacement, and so that was when you had that requirement. People were less inclined to remove a tree, knowing that they had to put 6 more trees back, and then so there was a little bit more. There was a deterrent of trying to. It was you got penalized.
So my question to the committee here then is, do we want to move forward and explore the option of revamping our tree ordinance?
I'm supportive, not just to simplify the process for residents.
Simplifying the application. I think
Just-
I'm sorry, yeah. think we have a problem it's two parts. One is the problem is the application is way too complicated for simple cut downs. I've talked to George Sweeten, who's a certified tree expert and he's selling at the farm in Green Village trees, and his concern is that people cut down trees without permits because the application is so complicated. And then they come to him for replacement trees, and that's how he sort of gets informed about it. Like I have that on some knowledge anyway that is happening in the town. So we could potentially have a little more control if we simplify the application. Now on the other end of it is the developers clear cutting a lot, which I was horrified at when I saw it happening in my neighborhood. And then I realized over time, because I realized number one, having a root system go into a new foundation or pipes or whatever is problematic, especially at the price point and what people want to deal with. Well, the other thing is that much like the stormwater controls, it kind of settles, it gets better when it's done. Like it looks horrific for a while, and then when all the tree replacement trees come in when it's done, the property looks much better. So I wouldn't want to lose that aspect of it. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. So it's, I'm kind of on barbell. If we could come up with something.
Because I've never, I hear complaints during construction, all the trees are removed. I've never got a complaint that when or criticism when the house is ultimately done and it's fully landscaping.
Then it's fine.
I hear it's beautiful,
Right.
versus
Well, I'm just thinking maybe we sit there and form like a subcommittee essentially of 2 committee members who want to look at the tree ordinance and provide suggestions on how to change it. Maybe with John's help or with administrator's help or et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it should include us. And I think they could go part and parcel, because what I heard John say, correct me if I'm wrong, is though the application is driven by all the parameters of the ordinance. That's why.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah,
maybe it could be streamlined. Do you know who wrote that application, put that application
I put
together?
that application together, yeah.
Right,
So it was an
so-
engineer putting it together.
Well, that's what I'm saying,
But I
maybe
mean-
if we,
But I did give it to my admin, and I asked her to fill it out, so.
No, but I mean, I guess my point is though, I mean, you wouldn't make it more burdensome than it needed to be. I just know from our conversations. But if there is a way to streamline it, then it would have to go hand in hand with
Right.
There's
the
no
ordinance,
question,
it
it's a
sounds like,
complicated
so.
ordinance, because it's a complicated issue.
Right.
We're trying to over-regulate it in a way, and the more simpler we can do
Right.
it, the better,
Well, that's what I'm wondering, if maybe if we get a couple committee members to work, to really take a look at it and kinda, redline it. What do you guys think?
I mean, I'm fine to participate on that, but I think it's gotta be a joint party line, cross-party line effort,
Yeah. Anybody here wanna take a stab?
I can do it.
Yeah,
You wanna do it? I can do it.
okay, the 2 of you wanna take a stab at it?
Sure.
Does that sound good to everybody?
Going in, I have, like John said right at the outset, I think Mark too, I have very conflicting misgivings about this. I like
Right.
the way the town looks, and think, I kinda think that everybody likes the way the town looks, and hopefully we'll
Right.
do the right thing, but I also don't like telling people what to do with their private
Right.
property.
No, I know,
That's why it sounds like it's too perfect,
Right.
It's a perfect, because you need both perspectives.
Right.
You really do.
But I think we're all in agreement that the application, no offense to John,
Yeah.
is complicated,
So perhaps you guys can schedule some time.
I'll reach out to you both.
Yeah,
schedule a meeting.
and we can move from there, and then maybe by like the next workshop meeting, so in like a month, we can come sit down with some
at least I've
idea.
read it and see what's going on.
Correct, by that point, you guys
Yeah.
have some idea of, we can figure out how to move forward from there. Sound good?
Yep.
Sounds like a
Sounds good,
Last
okay.
question, John, this application would also be filled out by a developer who's doing a site plan redevelopment, right?
Yes, but it's much easier when you have a site plan.
You've done all the work.
He's done all the work, all the trees are plotted, doing a lot grading plan is very easy to review the ordinance. So even if they fill out the application wrong, we can check it and we make sure out there from the lot grading perspective that it's being implemented.
So would it preclude the notion of having 2 separate applications, one that is required in the event of a a minor or a major.
Well, you can't regulate it, if you're a developer, you have to follow these set of rules, you're a homeowner, you have these set of rules. You can't
Well,
do it
not
that
that,
way.
but that's why I said minor, major.
But yeah, but if you're doing it as, certainly if you're regulating it under a lot grading, which usually a lot grading, you're getting, a lot more, you're getting all the information on the plan, it's all being plotted, and, you can possibly regulate it differently that way. And it's very easy to regulate this ordinance with a lot grading plan. You can count the trees, you can look at where the trees are, you can look at the density. It's just very difficult to do it with a homeowner coming in, just doing one tree, and, what do you mean all this density and all these things? It's much harder to do it for one tree or a single-family home versus a lot grading.
Right.
Because that's really where most of the complaints were coming from
Right.
the lot grading, is from the new homes. And so the ordinance really written to more regulate the lot grading plans versus the individual home.
All right, so let's move on to.
Real quick, I don't want
Yep.
to belabor us too long, but like to your story about Sweden, I'm just kind of curious when you said people are removing trees without permits, like, are they doing it themselves? Is he doing it for them?
They probably hire
I mean,
company.
Yeah, I mean,
It could also be, we do have a registration, so people that, and you have to be registered, a tree company has to be registered.
That's where I was going with
And-
this.
and
Is
so
there
they
any
are-
sort of regulation on cutting down
And
trees?
so,
If
and
somebody
we've
asked you to cut a tree
penalized,
down?
we've penalized some of these tree companies significantly, brought some of them to the court. One tree company, I think we had like an $8,000 fine against them for.
Well, I remember the one down
Right.
at Rose Terrace or
Yeah,
whatever.
and
that
so-
was
yeah, I
not
remember
law,
that one.
but
So,
that was a little
so
different.
if the companies, are registered, I think they're not going, at least I think we've done enough to discourage them to try and cut trees without getting a permit. It's the new companies that come in that aren't registered, that aren't familiar with the code, they're just coming in and doing it. And,
Yeah.
or you have a smaller landscaper, and in this case,
It's-
they're coming in to buy a new tree, and he's advising them on the tree.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
Yeah,
not
so-
a tree
so-
company per
yeah.
se, but somebody who's doing it.
And I'm sure if you just randomly ask someone resident in town, do you know if you need a tree permit to remove your tree or not? And they may just, I don't know.
I don't know, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
often, the residents, the residents don't keep up with ordinances, the code books,
Of
and
course
things
not,
like that.
yeah.
They just call up a tree company and get their tree removed, and, it's the tree company that's really gonna say if they need it or not.
Mhm. All right, so let's move on to the New Jersey American Water Grant.
So, Committeeman Lois sent an email sent an email to me, brought that up, I think, in the last workshop meeting, and we followed up with an email. So in your packet should be correspondence on that, that, involves what the grant terms are. So, Committeeman Lois?
Yeah, propose that we apply for the grant.
Okay.
I'm sorry, which grant was this?
New Jersey American Water
And what was it supposed to be for?
We'll turn to Committeeman
Sorry,
Lois
I'm trying
to
to
talk
remember
about.
what. What was it supposed to be for? You were
You
recommending?
mean a dollar amount, or what does it do?
For use, what use?
It would be to increase stormwater recharge by removing some impervious coverage in, in public space, and then, replanting some native plants and, biodiverse plants.
Oh, you're talking about over by Arbor Green.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And, yeah, I had summarized that in the last meeting. I'd be happy to take any questions on it.
Yeah, I was just,
So yeah, John, I asked you to just kind of give us some background, because obviously it's close to wetlands, and so we just want to make sure that any work we do is okay. So
yeah,
John, can you?
we did get, we did had as part of the Arbor Green project, we did get they got a wetlands delineation, and the buffer actually did change from 50 feet when we first constructed the skate park to when they did a reclassification, did a new LOI, and the new LOI determined that the wetlands were actually exceptional, put a 150-foot buffer on those. And so, we probably couldn't construct that skate park today. So that entire property up to where the Arbor Green building is pretty much in the wetlands buffer. So in order to remove that pad, and because we have a right to maintain the existing infrastructure that's there, so we can maintain that. But if we're gonna change the use, change activities, you know, replanting, there actually is a specific permit if you're going to do enhancement within in a wetlands buffer area. So it's a general permit 16, relatively easy permit to get, you know, hard, but we would have to get that DEP permit for that.
So how much, money are we looking for from the grant?
So I
In
think
terms
the
of committing
grants-
with Lois,
Yeah, I think the grants.
Well, I understand that, that there's been some estimates sent around that haven't been forwarded over to me, but, at this committee, the three of us previously had approved, ripping it up, pulling up the skate park, and that we had said that we were interested in that, and this is a mechanism in order to defray whatever cost it is that we've already committed to, so
I
I'm
was
not
just
sure whether
asking
we're
how
at-
much the grant we were seeking for.
Oh, yeah, well, I had said last time,
I don't remember, that was,
well, there is a maximum, so you don't have to seek any amount, you know, you can
so
seek.
what's the amount that we are hoping to get?
Well, that would depend on costs, but I
You
don't
get,
have.
you gotta
I
give me
don't-
approximate.
I don't have the costs, I understand Mr. Shoddy has the
Mark,
costs.
is it usually 10 grand? I thought they're really usually smaller grants,
The
right?
maximum
Is
one,
10 grand?
whatever the
Maximum,
cost of
okay.
the-
That's
the
all
roof.
we needed.
But there, right, I'm just asking for numbers here.
What we were talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, so I
So we're
I
looking,
would
so
think,
we're
yeah, so I would
probably
think,
about $10,000?
yeah, so I would think that we might wanna consider is certainly the DPW is good at ripping things up.
Right,
So,
right,
You know,
right.
just have the
So then-
DPW remove it and then, you know, take the 10 grand to
And
do
we're
a nice
looking-
planting plan around that, might be something. to
So, you're saying that there were estimates going out about ripping it up?
yes, supposedly Commitment Lois asked the resident to solicit a quote from a vendor,
Okay,
which got sent to John, and it was very roundabout, really,
okay,
these things should be coordinated with the administrator.
right.
So, actually, John got the estimate, didn't know what it was about, emailed Rich and I, and was like, you guys know anything about this? So I spoke with the resident's name that was on the estimate, and
Okay,
kind of got to the bottom of it, but the estimate is, it's substantial, so when it gets to a
can you
certain,
tell us like around?
is it 20-something
Yeah,
thousand?
it was over to, over 17.5, which would
Yeah.
have to go out to public.
So we have to go out to
Okay.
bid, so that,
Skate park?
Yeah.
to rip up the asphalt, correct.
Why do we, I don't recall an ordinance being passed to rip it up, but
I
why
don't-
can't we
I
just
don't
cover
either.
it with sod, a few inches,
Well-
you can't just cover it with
Yes.
dirt and sod?
Yeah, you'll probably it's probably gonna die right away. Really need to remove it and then, because you'd have to put at least a foot of soil or more over it on top of it and then put soil on it.
So then,
Because it'll dry out too quick. It's not gonna, you need the root structure.
Oh, okay.
It's just-
My
yeah.
patio seems to grow weeds very readily.
Yeah, they grow
so-
weeds, they grow very good in the cracks and things,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
but.
You wanna get rid of it, you gotta jackhammer it and truck it away.
Yeah, they have I'm sure the
Which for the
DPW,
record,
they'll
I'm in
grind
favor.
it up
So
with their
then-
grinder
right.
and then just.
Yeah.
okay,
yeah.
so you're recommending us to use our Department of Public Works to rip it up if we were gonna go
I
this
think that's the
route?
most economical way of doing it. They'll need, they'll have to truck the material to, either Tilcon or somewhere to get rid of it, and there'll be a cost per load, but that shouldn't be.
And then we'd be reaching out for this grant for around $10,000?
Oh, that's the maximum.
Up to,
Up to, yeah. Guess we just have to
So-
come up with.
for, and it would be for planting native trees?
No, in fact, the Open Space Committee has, access to some, grasses and, our Open Space Committee chair happens to be here if you'd like.
Yeah,
to
but
have
I'm
him.
also the liaison to the Open Space Committee. We
Okay.
haven't met yet this year, so, but you're the one who presented this, so I'd like to know the information.
There is some seed stock, and the idea, I think, is, native species, which mostly be grasses.
I think they.
So, okay, so we were gonna be putting grasses and okay.
Which is sort of something like a
setback.
setback to the
That's just
wetlands
the planning board,
buffer.
they didn't act on it, so.
I mean, I'm
We didn't
fine
do
with,
formal action, we just said,
putting
action
native
on it.
grasses and flowers and wildflowers and stuff up there. I guess, so the main thing would be writing this grant that up to $10,000?
But to have the most successful grant, there is always a lot of components to it, right? So I'm not sure what the costs are involved, I haven't seen any of the estimates related to it. I mean, and I would imagine our DPW would need to, at a minimum,
But we're just saying that if we had our DPW do it, the estimates would matter.
They would add well,
There
there
would be
would still
some
be a
costs.
cost
Yes.
to
Yeah,
rent
it's
a
a still-
backhoe,
Right.
because
Labor.
we don't have a backhoe of that size, right, that would be needed to do that.
No, I would think that they would just go in with, they have a, on the attachment.
John, I'm sorry, if I just, so we're not derailing into the details of how we're gonna
Right.
execute this, because, with all due respect, I don't think you need to get involved in that. It's
Yeah.
more of set policy direction.
Yep.
We'll take care of it.
Yeah, the
But
DPW
we just need to know,
What's the
do we wanna
question?
submit for the grants?
I
What's the downside to submitting to a grant? If
Yeah, I
we-
would
if we
think it's
we
just
can get
time.
some money.
I think it's more of just time and paying someone to prepare the grant. I think that's what it is.
If it's the policy direction to get rid of this anyway, then why not apply for the grant?
That's what I
Well,
said.
that's what I'm saying though, is it's just, you know, the time involved to prepare these grant applications, which is a lot of time.
John,
Yeah,
what's
I
your
drafted.
experience with this
Huh?
grant application? I mean, is this a good?
Well, in the past, it's been John.
I haven't applied for this one in the past, because usually when the dollar amount is just low, I usually discourage me getting involved in
Right,
just
'cause-
working with, you know, someone from the open space wants to take the
Right.
lead and start writing something up, and I'll tweak it and I'll help them, you know,
Right.
just kind of get him over the goal, but have someone
Well,
else take the
Committeeman
lead.
Lois, this has been your project. Do you wanna write the grant?
Well, I am a utilities liaison, I'd be happy to, but it's a requirement of the grant that there be a partnership between two entities at least. So the open space committee, as the open space liaison, if you would help, that would be wonderful.
I don't have the time, to write a grant, but if you have the time to write a grant, by all means, I think we're all on board for you to write it. I can tell you right now, I just don't have the time. I already commit over 60 hours a week to this job. And
Are
I
you
have
just
little
asking for
kids.
the open space
Right.
committee to support the grant?
So to support the grant, I just said I'm
Yeah,
all
we-
for it,
we've
but
got some
I don't have
wonderful
time to
volunteers
write a
who I'm
grant.
sure will support the
Yeah, I think
grant.
maybe
You
the
have to leave
environmental,
it to
have
me
a
to-
joint project, environmental commission and the open space,
Mhm.
and just,
Exactly, so
and
I'm
just.
sure
Yeah.
that there's some wonderful people, wonderful
Yeah.
volunteers that will get
What's
an
the deadline?
application written.
I believe it's end of the month. The deadline's end of the month. It was in the packet,
Yes,
but,
it's
I
March
believe it's at the
31st
end of
is
the month.
deadline.
I'm always available to help with if for cost estimates or
out too,
tweaking
yeah.
or adding some, you know, additional thoughts to it, or just, you know, review it if you want, but, you know, I try to discourage me getting involved with when grants.
Yeah, so I guess
So
the,
that makes sense.
Yeah, so I
It's
guess,
cost.
since this is probably the first grant that we've talked about like this in workshop, I guess the intent is for there to be a scope of work that you all understand, so we
Yeah.
can be clear on carrying out that scope of work.
Yeah.
So that way you're all agreeing to the submission, right? So what I'm hearing is that this application is gonna entail ripping up that asphalt pad and then replacing it with plantings. You know, biodiverse, native plantings, things are gonna manage, the stormwater and, help the environment in that location. And so that's gonna involve a DEP application, some work by DPW, and probably some costs then that will exceed the grant, award itself. But have I summarized? You know, that's what, I guess, the hope and the intent of when a grant is presented to you, either by yourselves or by us, that we're clear on. So does that capture everything, and is
Right.
everybody on board with
I
that?
think so, except for the part about the cost exceeding the amount of the grant.
The costs are gonna exceed the amount of the grant, without a
Well, yeah,
doubt.
just the excavations.
That's what I'm saying, so that's where
We
the
said,
question goes.
DPW was gonna do it.
Well, yeah, they'll do
So-
it, but there's still gonna be, there's time in that there's work involved in it, and there are man hours that might be taken away from other things, but
That will-
also there's the disposal.
Disposal.
The disposal
Even
alone
that.
is a cost, in and of itself. If there's other equipment that's involved, so I can tell you for sure
so-
that project will
Well, I want
certainly.
the project to happen, and I like
Okay.
to see as much of it as possible to get offset by the grant, so.
Okay.
Yeah, and you look at the big picture that, you know, we have this blemish
Yeah.
in town, let's remove it, put some nice planting in there, we can have it
Yeah.
as a stormwater recharge component and stuff, maybe even do an educational sign, and just,
You
you know, I
live
think
where I
it's
live,
something
you
great.
drive past it every day, it drives
Yeah.
me crazy.
Yeah, so we could look at it, so there likely be some supplemental costs, but the big picture is that we're looking at a really, you know, worthwhile project.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the zoning setbacks.
That was, so, there's a memo that John prepared this months ago, you're all familiar with this topic, I think, Committeeman, you may or may not be aware of the history behind it, but John did put it in the memo. This kinda goes back to last summer, actually it goes back to 2019, I believe, and, a resident had been complaining about an issue, so John had prepared a memo, actually a letter to the planning board recommending that they take the issue up, and the complaints come up again, and so it was requested at, I think, our last workshop meeting that we, as a township, take up the issue, so.
Yeah, I think last year, the committee discussed it, and they, suggested defer to the planning board to review it. I did send the memo to Kevin Sullivan, the chairman. I think it just happened where it's November, December, when the holidays, it just doesn't get momentum. And so, I just emailed Kevin again and say, hey, let's revisit this.
Do we need to formally refer it? Is there do we need to pass a
That was-
resolution?
No, I don't think so. No, I just
Okay.
think it needs to be, just brought to their attention again to do that. I think there is two items though that we should consider. The one is, I thought of this today as I was talking about this subject, is that I think there's clearly a typo in the code. It's just, and to me, it seems like we shouldn't have to go through an ordinance process when something is obviously a typo. We should be administratively just correct that. And, we could have Greg go back and try and find the original ordinance and make sure that maybe it was a typo in the original ordinance, or it was just from the ordinance to getting codified, the mistake was made, and we just need to correct that. That should be the first thing. It's just the reference to in the schedule. In the zoning schedule, the reference to the footnotes are wrong, and they're off all by one. And so it's obviously that it was just not codified correctly when they did that. So I think we can do something administratively.
Yeah, let's talk tomorrow.
Yeah, we can just correct that. I think that's something, so that will correct, and that's one of the things that got very confusing, because his resident was referring to the code, and then they're referring to another section that doesn't even apply to setbacks, it replied more to lot coverage, and so it was just a lot of confusion. And so, this is a discussion over it. Yarmouth is particularly where the complaint came from. And if you go down to Yarmouth, you'll see there was one tear down rebuild, and the homeowner actually set the house to the required front yard setback, whereas all the existing homes are set back further back from the minimum front yard setback. And so the resident was concerned regarding, that it was out of place.
And this is the homeowner that is called in to the meetings periodically.
Correct.
If
So,
you can send me an email with the section of the code, I'll check.
I'll send you a memo that outlines exactly, and you can.
Okay, so do you need consensus from us to
No,
refer it, or?
I've already reached out to Kevin. I'll
Okay.
just be a little more aggressive with Kevin to make sure that, it gets on the next discussion item and have
What is the discussion item, just?
the discussion is just looking at, should there be, more, and they may pull Frank Banish into it also in the discussion, and just see, does what's happening on Yarmouth, is that characteristic of just Yarmouth versus other locations? Should they look at, in that type of scenario, you can look at the existing code, and the existing code really refers to houses setting back much further versus what's occurring on Yarmouth. And what the code really doesn't address what's happening on Yarmouth, because it's just really a minor setback. So look at if this is something that, they'll ultimately come back with a recommendation to the committee saying that we feel that, this needs further assessment, or this, we don't feel that the code needs to be changed, or just get their opinion on it. And so, as a planning board, as the body that, is the keeper of the master plan, this is something that needs further, consideration.
It also came up, it's across Fairmount for me, I can't think of the road, but, it tends to be the R4 zone where a lot of these things have come up.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Woodlawn.
It's one of those streets over there.
Yes, yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
That is very,
Yeah.
that there's a lot of diversity in that, and so
Yes.
it's.
Some places like that.
Though
Yes.
there's one specific home
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because what happens
I won't get into
if it's a tear down real build in the R4 zone, they're like any development in any zone, they're maximizing the building coverage, and so they push it all the way to the front yard so they can get as much building as possible and increase the rear yard as much as possible, so you can accommodate that patio or other improvements in the rear. So. We just see that the trend is that if there's going to be tear down, because there really hasn't been as much redevelopment in the R4, because it's just smaller homes. People, they look for the larger homes in the R3, but we're starting to see that pattern, a little slow, but it's happening that people are starting to rebuild in the R4.
so let's move on to impervious coverage.
Yes.
Yep.
So that one's based off of, last meeting, Committeeman Lois brought up that concern, followed up with an email, indicating that there may be some sort of a loophole. I did ask John to kind of opine on the, impervious coverage versus pervious coverage issues here in town, as well as how that ties into lot coverage. So he put together an email, which was also included in your packet, with his overview of that. Any thoughts?
Well, I could just say that the,
Oh, you want the questions? So I'm trying to remember, there's so many things that were covered.
Yep.
Must be next week. Okay, so you're saying, you say, I have always taken the position that pervious pavement must be designed and constructed per NJDEP's BMP manual. So as opposed to taking the position, would we not want to clarify the ordinance to say that it does have to? Or your concern was that
was
it would
gonna be-
apply
Yeah,
to the
my,
pools and?
yeah, that would be my suggestion, is that, I'm taking, I'm interpreting the code and how the people have to address it versus someone just deferring the code and getting a strict interpretation of that. And so, I've been always taking the position that, if you're gonna take credit for impervious coverage as not being, impervious per the code, you have to construct that in accordance with NJDEP's regulations, and that's a very stringent requirement, and no one really will do that, especially on a residential level. It's just too much involved in that. And then also, you'd have to have an O&M manual for the pervious pavement, and it just goes on and on, the requirements. So kind of even discouraged it from any homeowner wanting to do this, because if I tell you, referring to the BMP manual, it's just onerous. But we also have to look at the perspective of what is lot coverage. And lot coverage is not necessarily just focusing on is something impervious or pervious. Lot coverage is how much is that lot being developed. And certainly, I think everyone would agree that we don't want someone to be able to put pervious pavement over their entire property and just have pavement everywhere, and they're in compliance. You want it's also intended not to have a certain amount of green space and combined with your improvements. And so that's the intent, is not necessarily impervious or pervious, but density of how much you're allowing that property to develop. The Municipal Land Use Code has updated their definition, where it says that pervious pavement is not considered impervious when it comes to lot coverage. And so basically you're saying, if you're gonna put in porous pavement, or you're gonna put in porous patio pavers, you can't, that's not gonna be excluded. It's included in your lot coverage, because it's taking that perspective that you're looking at the development, the intensity of the development on the lot versus looking at just impervious. So we could just simply modify our definition, and it's just a minor tweak to be reflective of the Municipal Land Use Code. And I've also taken that position too, that when people argue regarding my interpretation, I says, well, the Municipal Land Use Code, they don't include it, so that's why I'm supportive of that.
So you need guidance from us?
Well, I guess, is there a desire to make a change? I mean, John explained that it's not necessary
It's
to
not
make a change.
necessary.
It's not
The
like
provisions are there, but if it's the intent of the governing body to make it more direct, then that's obviously your purview as the legislature.
And just to be clear, the original concern that was raised is not a concern, because that was regarding the Charlie Brown.
Well, it was
site.
flagged
Yeah,
eventually
and they were-
anyways.
Yeah, what's
and-
interesting,
Yeah.
Charlie Brown was a unique case where their engineer just misrepresented how they were calculating the pervious coverage. That became an issue where under the municipal land use law, you have to have reasonable costs associated with the professional's review of an application. We can't go out there and survey on top of their survey to check something, or check all the, you start to do it. It has to be within reason, and so but in that case, there was so much doubt that we started to dive into and actually checking some of their calculations that they did far beyond what we typically do, and we started to see errors. And so that's what question there is, that they were misrepresenting. They were taking credit for this pervious pavement where it wasn't represented by them that they were taking the credit. And
Okay.
so that was unique with them. And this issue really hasn't come up with commercial properties, because we really haven't had a lot of commercial development recently. There hasn't been a lot. It's more We just, and then from a commercial standpoint, again, they have to comply with the BMP manual, and it is, in order to really comply with all those requirements, it's very stringent. It's not just putting the pavement, you're having the various different layers, and you have to do soil testing, and have an O&M manual, and it's a very onerous process to get that approved, and so, it's not something that comes up a lot.
But
So,
it might not be something that comes up a lot, but this is not simply a hypothetical exercise. There will be pervious concrete in this township where it would otherwise not be allowed. And it was as a result of this not being tight as it could be.
Yeah, well-
And we could clarify it in a fairly simple way, I think.
You could refer back to the new
We'll just follow
definition.
MLU
yeah,
up.
yeah, and I,
So that's what you're following is
Yeah.
the MLUL.
If you want, you can put it in.
Do we need to change
I'll
our?
stand up in any appeals court.
I mean, what I just heard is you said it would be a relatively insignificant change to
Right.
comply with the municipal, I'm all in favor, let's just do
All
it.
right.
Yeah,
Change.
yeah, because at the very least, it'll just stop a lot of the argument that they have with
Exactly, I
engineers.
get your
Okay.
position entirely, but why have the argument if we
Yeah.
can just
It
Okay.
comply?
supports your,
Yeah,
Okay, alright, so you guys have direction moving forward?
Yeah.
Pete, that's on you? Okay. Then next is the amendment to easement.
That one is pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
I think, unless
Yeah.
there's any questions. It was more of, it's on here as a heads up that it's coming up for the next
what
meeting
happened
as a
is,
resolution.
it was on a, prior development, it angled down,
Uh-huh,
that when the pipe went in, it went straight.
yeah,
So now we've just gotta change that easement here to go
Okay.
up here. It was just
so it's gonna be
really-
on the next agenda?
Absolutely.
yeah, just years ago, when they installed the sewer, they didn't install an easement. And so, when they went to the board for a Board of Adjustment to get approval, it was obvious that the sewer wasn't included in the sewer easement, so they just amended the sewer easement to put it
Got
in the
it.
sewer. So it was a mistake that happened, 40 years ago, and
It's
they're
been
resolved.
correcting it.
Oh, boy, alright. Well then,
Any questions on that one? No, so it'll be on for the next meeting.
alright,
Thank you,
thank you
John.
very much, John.
Okay?
Thank you,
Appreciate your
John.
time. Now,
Good night.
administration.
Yeah,
will
just,
let
well,
you-
make sure the clerk, I'll let him
Oh,
go
yeah.
first. Mayor,
Anything
if
you wanna
that's
say?
okay? I mean, he's.
you got my report, are there any questions?
Alright,
Okay, there were a bunch of other reports, construction building, didn't get follow-up, well, I did get follow-up questions from Committee Woman Ewald, I will get you that information. Unless there's any other questions on that report.
I had
Police,
some questions on the construction.
I'm sorry?
I had sent a question in under construction.
I mean, I've seen it, when did you send that committee?
Monday, but I'll.
Oh, the one last,
re-forward them.
yesterday afternoon, okay. Haven't had a chance to see it, didn't get them before 12 o'clock, so I apologize, I'll get to you this week on that. Police, the chief is coming back, in about 10 days, so, I am gonna go to his graduation, I will be there, that Thursday, so we'll wish him,
Kudos to him.
we'll wish him all of your best, and
absolutely.
Public Works, any questions there on the report? Didn't get anything there either.
I did, I sent in questions.
Okay, I guess those all must have come in late. I didn't see those. Recreation, anything else there?
Yep, I sent in questions.
Okay. Tax collector, she will be sending a bulk report. This was her first full month, so that's why this report wasn't included. She's doing catch-up and reconciling since the vacancy, so there will be a January, February, and March report in April, and she'll be coming here. That'll be her first meeting. She's coming here just to, introduce herself to you and the public and present those reports.
Great.
Tax assessor, any questions there? No? All right. Under admin, we did talk about the IT resolution and the website in executive session. Nothing
Yeah,
further.
I have one assessor question that
Yep.
I had reviewed. It seemed to me that the rut had stayed steady, and I looked at the AFS for the rut. Is that being, like, are you closely monitoring that, and will you be using that? Will you be looking at that to use its greatest advantage for the township when you're building the new budget?
So that does not fall under the tax assessor, that falls under the CFO, the RUT. The assessor doesn't really have anything to do with the RUT. But the RUT is always examined per the formula that the state provides when we develop the budget. So yeah, we'll be going over that. That's sort of
Well, I mean,
standard
they just be-
practice.
I guess the tax assessor being, having the collection rate as part of their.
The collector does the collection rate, not the assessor.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I guess we have an assessor's report with the collection rate in it.
Yeah, but the collection rate falls under the tax collector.
I understand, but we didn't have a tax collector report this.
Okay. So I guess I'm trying to understand what the nexus is between what you're talking about and the RUT. Or what's your intent, I guess, what commitment, how, would you like me to?
Yeah, just using, I mean, it seems that the RUT provides for a greater reserve than the assessor's report or the tax collector's report would indicate we necessarily need.
Okay. We will,
I mean, my understanding is they've always been conservative with the RUT, because if we don't collect, we still have to pay out on behalf of the schools and
the county,
the county.
the
So-
library.
The
Open
library,
space,
yeah,
yep,
so we
everything.
still have to pay regardless of what we receive in. So it's not just, they always they're cautious about how they use.
No, and we have to be cautious, and if you look at the assessor, the appeals report and things, you have to be cautious of all those factors, but you also have to, it would be nice to access some of that, because what we're looking at, I think, it's something like 4.5 times.
4.5 or 4 times what?
The RUT is something like 97.5, 97.2, it depends on which year you're looking at.
Mhm.
And then, the collection rate in this town, even in 2008, we're looking at 99.5% the collection rate.
Yeah,
Right.
historically, the RUT's been at 97.5. There was one year where we needed the funds and it went to 98%. But the finance committee has noted, we'll keep an eye on that.
And the law is a 3-year average, right? That's my understanding of the law.
Okay. First
IT.
item on here, yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, you already said.
Yeah, IT and the website were
We already
discussed in
discussed,
executive,
yeah.
so those are off the opioid settlement grant and the Morris County Historical Preservation Grant, are the two
Okay.
items. So grant full agenda this evening.
As always.
The opioid settlement grant, I did incorporate into the agenda packet the terms of the agreement with the AG's office, with the subdivision agreement on what the permissible uses are. It did come up at the last meeting as far as, wanting to spend that. I don't think there's a rush on that. We have the money, it's sitting in our account, so there's no sense of urgency in that. I think, I need some guidance from you guys as far as what you want to do. If you want to have something done with it sooner rather than later. If you are okay with waiting, once we get through the budget, maybe the police chief gets back, we can discuss it and figure out what the best use of those funds would be.
My thing is I want to be able to include our police. I know they have had some ideas in the past, so I think it would be important to include them in these discussions. So that's kind of my attitude, where,
Well, I suggested that the opioid settlement grant be used, but I of course put public safety first, absolutely. But I have both in verbal and email conversations with our chief. He said that they didn't have ideas for the money.
okay, the people, when I've spoken to our lieutenants and they have. So that's where I think it's valuable. Well, why don't we push this off onto the Public Safety Committee to look further into it, and we can reevaluate. Does that work?
Including the proposal that has already been
Yes.
assessed, just make sure everybody's in the loop before
Yeah.
we go forward with something.
Exactly.
Yeah. The opioid epidemic is really a horrific and frightening thing, especially
Absolutely.
with young kids.
It's even scary. It's mostly with like college kids is what I've seen lately, which is really really terrible.
Well, there are children that are 12, 11, that are experimenting with drugs for the first time and dying of opioid use. And I don't think it's something that we should hold back on. I think we've received the settlement money, and I think it's something that we need to deploy to effect. I don't think that, I I've seen that too many times in our township, unfortunately. We have, I believe we're the greatest township in New Jersey, but it is disappointing to me that we reserve and hold funds back for their intended purpose, whether it be the teen center or colony pool or opioid settlement money. I think it's really inappropriate to do that, especially with taxpayer funds that are confiscated, and grant funds are, confiscated somewhere else. They should be used to benefit current residents, not held on forever until prices escalate and the funds are near the end.
No, so we won't do that, Mayor. That's not what we're doing.
Right,
Yeah,
what
that's not
I'm-
what we're
Agree.
doing.
I did not hear anybody say, hold on to this funds
Right,
forever.
my-
I said,
my-
let's wait till the chief gets
Right.
back and
And
have
we
the
can-
public safety committee evaluate your
Why
proposal
don't,
and
we'll
make sure
come
there's not
back
something else
and
that
by
get
the
done.
next workshop meeting with some sort of game plan.
Yeah, there's no need for false
Well, is there
hysteria that
temporal
doesn't
risk
exist.
on-
There's no risk
no
for
time
holding off a month.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
There's no time risk.
No.
No, we have the money, but
Right.
I agree. I don't wanna sit on the money either.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which nobody is saying we're
But
doing
I
or
just
want to
think
do.
that it's, the most pressing matter should always be public safety. And as the people that police it, as our police, I think they need to be included in this decision.
Yeah, okay. Morris County Historical Preservation Grant, do you wanna field that, committee woman, or do you want me to talk about it?
Oh, okay. So as most everybody knows here, the Historical Society received a grant for the Red Brick Schoolhouse. They received a New Jersey Historical grant, and then they also received from the county. But they still don't have enough funds, and so they're gonna go back to the county for the second time to get the rest of the funds. They were supposed to have matching funds to the New Jersey grant, so they do have to go back. So they're asking for the mayor to endorse, but because it's a new grant process, we thought the committee would need to approve that, or
We may need
Best
to
to
do
have
a
the-
resolution to
Yeah.
authorize
Resolution
that
to authorize
submission,
it.
cause we still own the building, right,
I think we
did
did.
it la-
yeah, we still own the
We
building.
did it
so-
last
Yeah.
year.
Yeah,
We did
so-
it
It's the
last
same
year. It's the
resolution,
same
yeah.
thing. Mhm.
So just a template resolution essentially saying that we authorize the submission of that application, and then they can go ahead, so.
Yep.
If there's no issues, we'll have that on the agenda for the 21st. And in case you weren't aware, they were awarded historic status by the state, which is great. National and state.
yes.
That is great. I would just say that I would love to see that project also move forward. We have funds in our open space fund, which is, the proper name of it is Open Space and Historical Trust. We could certainly forward those, whatever grant fund money that they need in order to move forward with their project. The gap is, when I was looking at it, was sub $300,000, right? It was 100
I have
something.
80,000 is left.
80,000.
80,000 is
So, I mean,
waiting for you.
I would say, I would like to make a motion that we advance them to 80,000 while they wait for these grant funds so that they can begin the renovation and simply accessing the historical trust that we already have. That's never been used for historic renovation or for its purpose. So I think we should use that fund. Is there a second to that?
If you get the money from somewhere else, does
Yeah.
that preclude you from asking, is that considered double dipping or anything like that? Is
Look
it-
at the grant.
I just wanna make sure about that, but other than that,
I would suggest that we at least get through the budget process. There's
Yeah.
been no, at least since I got here, that open space account has just been treated as an open bank account, with no budget, no real consideration for the debt service, continuing operating costs, and the implications of that tax. My understanding is that tax was not always 2%, it's fluctuated over the years, so, there really should be some consideration for not only how we're gonna treat that fund this year, the debt service that's coming out of it, and, what our long-term plan is. And that can certainly be, I think, a
Yeah,
consideration.
I'm not under the impression they've been slowed down at all. So in the last meeting I had mentioned that they've been meeting with the New Jersey Historic Trust, and they've been assigned a project coordinator, and they've already kind of begun the process. So things are moving forward. I mean, I'll find out if they feel
Well,
like they're still
I mean,
slowed down in any way, but I haven't gotten
Since we
that sense
still
at
need
all.
we'll be having what, 2 or 3 at least, probably 4 more budget meetings,
Mhm.
with the finance committee. Why don't we hold off before we sit there and commit to an $80,000 number and take a look at where we're at and kind of go from there. But in the meantime, happily, sign off on a recommendation for the grant, a letter of support, whatever they need.
Yeah, they can bring back some of our county tax dollars to fund this.
Exactly,
No,
by all
absolutely,
means.
I'm in favor of that, but just to.
And you can confirm what I asked too, just wanna make
Yeah.
sure we don't shoot ourselves in the foot.
Sometimes
Right.
in a grant, you have, to if you apply, you can't have a secondary source or.
Yeah.
And if anyone who's worried about the depletion of the open space fund or what its uses are, should review last year's AFS and this year's AFS, because the annual financial statement shows that the open space fund is in better shape, and the debt for open space has been reduced over what we were looking at before the budget of last year. So it's fully provided for, and it's 2 cents on every $100 of valuation. So with that extra $50 million of added assessed values, only going to bring in more money than the $665,000 that's poured into that.
But that.
Yeah, all things we already know, Mayor.
Yeah.
All things we already
And,
know.
right, and also
Well,
that.
if the things are already known, then the statement that's been rated as an open fund.
It has
The
been.
fund is solvent. If the fund is not only solvent, it has increased in
No,
its,
solvency, when you talk about you can constantly tax people, that doesn't mean it's solvent, right? If you can just constantly say, well, it's running a deficit or it's
I'm not
very
for higher
expensive.
taxes. If you're for lower taxes, you're with me, so I'm all for
Right,
that.
but the more you spend out of open space, then the more you're advocating for higher taxes.
Well, and plus, we don't know what we
It's
wanna
capped at
spend.
2%,
I mean,
so
we,
it's
if we,
not
we
gas.
do have money in open space, but we, if we want to sit there and put in a turf field, or if we want to do a large project like capital project in open space, maybe we're better off, making arrangements and planning for something like that.
That's
as
kind of what I
opposed to-
keep on getting at, Mayor.
Yes.
We don't have a strategic plan. We
We-
keep
correct,
treating things as,
correct.
we've got this piggy bank, let's tap into it. We've got this
Exactly.
piggy bank, let's tap
Right.
into it. Best practice, running good government, you're coming up with
Right.
long-term plans and a strategic plan, looking
Totally
at all your
agree.
assets, not
And
just,
we'll
well,
be
we've got this
sitting
fund, we
down-
can tax people, let's take $80,000 out of it.
I agree.
To Committeewoman Ewald's point, the county, if they've got the money to pony up for it, let's get our return from them on it.
I agree. All right, so we have so we'll be adding that onto the next agenda.
Yep.
Is there anything else that we have for tonight?
I don't think so.
That's
Hearing
it.
of the citizens.
That wasn't
Hearing
enough?
of citizens.
Oh, it was a jam-packed agenda this
Yes.
evening. All right, so then I'm gonna be opening up the hearing of citizens again to, do I need to read the whole thing?
No.
You already heard it? Okay.
Got 3 minutes.
You're good.
Everyone, my name is Christina Mott, and I'm on Nicholson Drive in Township. And just for clarity, I want to say that I am a trustee on the library board representing Township, but I'm speaking independently of that role and just expressing my personal opinion. I just wanted to say I hope that the committee will very seriously consider supporting the library's Bridging Space to Place capital campaign. One thing I want to emphasize from the presentation is that the costs for construction are climbing quickly. Waiting for grants in the past did not work. So I think it's important to consider other mechanisms to fund renovation. This is an investment in one of our most precious local institutions. The library is more than a home for book collections. It houses historical artifacts and serves as a community center for both Chathams. I believe knowledge is power, and so to me the library is a center for empowerment. People regardless of age, natural ability, gender, socioeconomic status, political or religious affiliations can use this resource for entertainment and attainment. The library is a safe space for everyone in our community to explore new ideas through books, meet friends, exist in peaceful solitude, hear new ideas in a lecture, or hold a meeting for a community group. The decision you make about funding this institution will have long-lasting impact in our community. This is our chance to leave a legacy of empowerment to future generations of Chathamites, and I think we should take that opportunity to invest in the future of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I always like to hear nice, positive words on the library, which I will wholeheartedly agree with. Any other comments? Anybody online?
No hands raised.
All right, last call. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close the public comment section and move on to an adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.
And it didn't
It
survive.
could have been
Halfway
a
through, that's why I
It's only
grabbed yours.
9:15, 9:20.
Is it? 6:30? 3 hours.
3 hours.